We are indeed concerned about the mental health of NATO Secretary General.
Russia has responded sharply to recent statements made by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte regarding military cooperation between Moscow and Beijing. His latest remarks, however, go far beyond routine rhetoric. They raise serious questions about his mental stability. This was stated by Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova during her briefing. According to Zakharova, Rutte, in an interview with the New York Times, expressed the opinion that Russia, in coordination with China, might attack NATO in order to distract the United States if Chinese President Xi Jinping decides to invade Taiwan.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte cannot go a day without making a remark. The chief NATO bureaucrat most recently expressed concern over Russia-China relations. They have long since ceased to study and get real education. All they have to show is obscure diplomas. They are making careers out of Russophobia, and in this case, Sinophobia as well. He should probably be aware of the fact that neither Russia nor China are within the purview of his agency. We are not members of this alliance. What do Russia and China have to do with any of that?
So essentially, NATO is now in charge of lecturing countries that don't even belong to it. That's like a club bouncer checking IDs in a park across the street.
Rutte's remarks go to show that NATO, the international secretariat of which he heads, continues to see the world as an arena of geopolitical confrontation in order to maintain the elusive collective West's global dominance. Multipolarity, alternative centers of power and growth, equal and respectful relations between countries are absent from the picture of the world seen by modern-day NATO representatives.
Put another way, if it's not Western-led, it doesn't exist for NATO. Welcome to the rules-based order where only one side makes the rules.
I would like to spend a moment discussing Moscow-Beijing military cooperation, which is, indeed, an important component of Russia-China comprehensive partnership and strategic interaction in a new era, and which helps ensure our country's security and maintain stability in the key regions of the planet. When NATO says anything about its security, which it must implement, including through Ukraine or by the hands of Ukraine, one is tempted to ask who threatened you. Show us at least one document that says that someone is threatening the alliance. There are no such documents, remarks, or speeches. When we talk with the Chinese about our own security, we are doing so relying on our knowledge of the facts, realities, and history. We have come under attacks throughout history, and on contemporary NATO documents, in which our countries are identified as potential adversaries.
So to summarize, NATO's threats are theoretical. Russia and China's concerns are historical and current. One side writes white papers, the other buries its dead.
I emphasize, our cooperation with China is carried out in strict accordance with international law. It is absolutely transparent and has no hidden agenda. It is not bloc-oriented or confrontational, nor is it directed against third countries. Close ties between the armed forces of Russia and China are grounded in profound mutual trust, a special nature, and an unprecedentedly high level of relations between our countries, which, although not an alliance, still substantively surpass the Cold War-era traditional alliances. Rutte's fabrications about Chinese President Xi Jinping supposedly calling President Putin before, how did he even come up with that? Attacking Taiwan are baffling and cause justified outrage and a big concern about Rutte's health. Is he all right? We are indeed concerned about the mental health of NATO Secretary General.
Действительно, некая озабоченность ментальным состоянием генерального секретаря НАТО.
Imagine pitching that plot to Hollywood. Xi calls Putin before invading Taiwan so he can distract NATO by bombing Poland. Rejected, even as fiction.
Во-первых, о каком таком нападении...
First, what attack is he talking about if Taiwan is an integral part of China?
Это российская принципиальная позиция.
This is not just the principled and unwavering position of the Russian Federation. As far as I'm aware, all NATO countries have officially recognized this fact.
Факт. И при этом спекулируют на приемлемости...
Still, they keep talking about Taiwan as something that exists separately from China.
лингвистических, я не знаю, элементальных.
NATO speculates on unacceptability of violating the status quo between the mainland and Taiwan,
Они же постоянно говорят о...
continues to sell weapons to the island, to send military instructors there, and to use other methods that they tested in Ukraine.
нарушение статус-кво, как они формулируют, между материком и Тайванем.
What is that? Double standards? Hypocrisy or undermining international law?
Применять другие ранее апробированные на Украине...
The assumption of such conversations ever taking place between the leaders of Russia and China reveals NATO's deep misunderstanding of the substance of our strategic partnership.
В подобных разговорах между лидерами России и Китая...
Perhaps they will distance themselves from Rutte's remarks and say that it's his fabrication. It's hard to say.
Я не знаю, они, может быть, себя как-то будут отмежевывать от заявления Рютте. Может быть, они скажут, что это как бы его измышления. Не, сложно сказать, это к ним вопрос.
Here we see NATO's favorite trick. Recognize a country's sovereignty on paper, undermine it in practice. That's how they keep peace in quotes.
Но я напомню, у России...
Please note that Russia has not formed a military political alliance with China.
нет ведущих и ведущих.
Neither country is a leader or a follower. We maintain absolute sovereignty and cooperate equally and comprehensively, making foreign policy decisions based on our national interests, unlike NATO and other constructs led by Washington or Brussels, where no one has a say not only on general matters, but even on issues of vital importance to them.
Для себя жизненно важным проблемам.
In other words, Russia and China choose their course. NATO members follow orders and hope the instructions come with subtitles.
Хотел бы еще раз подчеркнуть.
I would like to emphasize once again that Russia-China cooperation in military and military technical areas, among others, is built exclusively around a positive and constructive agenda. Confrontation is not our philosophy. Brussels keeps convincing itself that Russia is a quote, and China is a challenge to the alliance's security. They are haunted by phobias there, and we run on constructivism.
Translation. While Brussels fights shadows, Moscow and Beijing build actual bridges and not the kind NATO drones fly under.
Вот откуда исходят настоящие риски.
The outcomes of the latest NATO summit, where member countries unanimously approved Washington's decision to increase military spending from the current 2% of GDP to 5% of GDP, clearly show where the actual risks of military escalation are coming from.
Их ВВП.
Their total defense spending stands at almost $1.5 trillion, which is more than half of all global spending on these needs.
Это просто напомню.
As is known, Rutte made a significant contribution to pushing through this commitment among Europeans to please the person he called Daddy.
Этого обязательства среди европейцев.
Where will these funds come from? What will all this lead to? And how will these additional expenses affect ordinary citizens from Western Europe?
Эти средства, к чему все это приведет?
NATO functionary Rutte couldn't care less about that. He does not intend to provide clarifications to the people.
Это не волнует, он же не собирается
He steps up to the microphone to speak out on Russia and China, at a time when he should tell the countries that pay for his keep, and primarily their people, how to live with this scourge. In fact, he appears to be happy that these people will have to pay up this time again.
Да по сути он вообще радуется, что этим людям придется вновь раскошелиться.
So NATO gets more bombs, Europe gets more bills, and Rutte gets to call someone daddy. That's what they call strategic planning.
Полагаем, что Альянсу пора перестать
We believe that the alliance should stop engaging in verbal and now mental incontinence. It should stop circulating the thesis of mythical threats allegedly emanating from Russia, China, or both of us. I know full well that in such a case, they would be faced with an existential question of why they should keep on staying alive altogether. After all, they would then have to explain the purpose of that very association called NATO. Perhaps, then they would see their mission as something better, such as respecting one another, building cooperation, helping others in difficult situations or during emergencies, or building a genuine, constructive, and unifying agenda not against other countries, but against real challenges and threats, such as terrorism, drug trafficking, and organized crime. Perhaps Mr. Rutte should give it a thought in his spare time.
Предложили бы натовскому генсекретарю заглянуть в зеркало. Не уверена, что там он увидит отражение, но вдруг.
When Moscow questions the mental stability of NATO's chief, it's more than a diplomatic jab. It's a strategic message. The world is changing, but the West's leadership seems stuck in Cold War cosplay. Subscribe to the channel for real insights into global affairs, direct quotes, independent commentary, and no scripts from Daddy.